Picture this. It's spring break 2026.
Oh, a prime time for total chaos.
Right, exactly. You are at the Children's Museum of Brownsville, and it is like exactly as chaotic as you're imagining right now.
I can hear it already.
Yeah, you've got toddlers just sprinting in every conceivable direction. There's that deafening echo of 100 different conversations bouncing off the linoleum floors.
Oh, and the clattering of those wooden interactive physics exhibits.
Yes, the wooden blocks crashing down. Plus, there's that overwhelming scent of like hand sanitizer mixed with stale graham crackers.
A very specific aroma.
It really is. But okay, if you look closely at the parents, mostly folks in their 20s and 30s, standing off to the side, holding these half-empty water bottles and heavy diaper bags, they are quietly grappling with this massive, invisible weight.
Yeah, they really are.
Because they are doing something that honestly no human beings have ever done before. They are raising the very first generation of kids who will never, ever know a world without immersive artificial intelligence.
It is a profound historical shift. I mean, the mental load of that is just palpable when you walk into a space like that. Because these aren't just children who will use, a new piece of software or a new app.
Right.
These are children who will have synthetic intelligence seamlessly integrated into their foundational education, their future economic reality, and, honestly, the core of their social lives.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We have an incredible stack of sources today. The Children's Museum of Brownsville actually took the time, like right in the middle of that spring break chaos, to extensively survey these families.
Which is an incredible feat on its own.
Seriously. But we have the raw data, we've got the long-form parent testimonials, and the exact breakdown of how the parents of 1 to 10-year-olds are viewing this AI revolution in real time.
And it's fascinating stuff.
It really is. We are going to look at the specific threats keeping them up at night, the unexpected hopes they're holding on to, and the completely new playbook they're trying to write just to survive it. So, for you listening, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because to understand what these parents are planning to do, we first have to understand the emotional baseline they are operating from. And looking at the sentiment data, it paints a pretty stark picture right out of the gate.
It really does. I mean, when you look at the raw emotional sentiment from the survey, it leans heavily, and I mean aggressively, in one direction.
Yeah.
Nearly 7 in 10 survey responses skewed entirely negative, 69.6% to be exact.
Wow. 7 in 10.
Yeah. And by comparison, less than 20%, 17.4%, registered as hopeful, and barely more than 1 in 10, just 13%, came in as outright positive.
So the overwhelming immediate reaction a parent has when you bring up AI in relation to their toddler or first grader is deeply, deeply negative.
Exactly. That's the baseline.
Now, I want to jump in here and contextualize that negativity, because when I first saw that roughly 70% figure, my immediate assumption was like, it's doomsday in there.
By panic mode.
Yeah. I pictured parents wanting to throw their routers into the ocean and move to a cabin in the woods. But looking at the crosstabs, the data breaking down the specific types of negative feelings, it tells a very different story.
It's much more nuanced.
It is. We have a roughly 3-to-2 ratio of practical concern over raw panic. Like 56.3% of the negative feelings are concern-based, while only 37.5% are feel-based.
Right.
So people aren't, paralyzed by a monster under the bed. It seems more like they are heavily focused on baby-proofing the house.
Well, I would actually challenge that baby-proofing analogy a little bit.
Oh, really? How come?
Because baby-proofing implies you know where the sharp corners are.
I like
You
it.
buy the foam bumpers, you stick them on the coffee table, and the problem is solved. What we are seeing in this data is much more complex.
So what are they actually doing then?
These parents are realizing that the fundamental floor plan of the house they live in is actively shifting beneath their feet. What's fascinating here is the sheer scope of their perspective.
Yeah, the scope was shocking.
You might assume a parent at a local museum is entirely consumed by the immediate localized threat to their own household, screen time rules, homework cheating, things like that.
Right, the day-to-day stuff.
But the data shows something completely unprecedented.
Yes, the perspective chart. This is the one that completely stopped me in my tracks.
Right. When asked where they are focusing their mental energy regarding AI, only a little over a third, 37.5% of these parents are focused primarily on their own child.
Which is wild.
It is. The largest group, 40.6% of parents, are entirely focused on what this means for society at large.
Over 40%.
Yeah. And another fifth of the respondents, 21.9%, are taking a massive global view.
That is just wild to me. Just think about the mental bandwidth required for that.
It's a heavy load.
You are at a children's museum. Your 4-year-old is probably having an absolute meltdown because they can't get a turn on the giant xylophone. And yet, 40% of your mental energy about technology is focused on macroeconomic shifts, social cohesion, and the fabric of society.
Multitasking at its finest.
Honestly.
Mm.
And another 20% is looking at the entire globe. For you listening right now, just consider your own feelings when you read the latest AI headline. Like, are you purely worried about your own inbox and your own job, or are you carrying the weight of the whole societal shift?
Because these parents are carrying the macro burden while simultaneously trying to manage a toddler's tantrum.
Exactly.
It reveals a level of intellectual maturity and systems thinking in the general public that we honestly often underestimate.
Yeah, we really do.
They recognize that hyper-focusing on their own child's iPad habits is useless if the broader social contract their child is going to inherit is fundamentally broken. They are looking at the ecosystem, not just the organism.
Which brings us to the actual threats. Since we know these parents are operating from a place of heavy concern, and they are taking this massive societal view, what exactly are they anticipating?
Well, when we look at the specific categories of concern, there is a massive spike right at the top of the chart.
Yeah, I saw that.
Over a fifth of all concerns, over 21%, fall strictly into cognitive and learning impacts.
That is the number one worry.
Number one, followed very closely by loss of creativity and originality, which sits at around 16%.
And in the written testimonials, parents are repeatedly using these really visceral phrases like brain rot.
Yes, brain rot came up a lot.
They are terrified of their kids developing an over-reliance on AI for simple problem solving. But I have to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Okay, go for it.
Are we just repeating the same historical panic cycle? Like, people used to say calculators would destroy our ability to do math. They said the printing press would ruin human memory because we wouldn't have to memorize epic poems anymore.
Right, right.
They said television would literally melt our brains. Is this brain rot fear just the 2026 version of calculator panic?
I mean, historians of technology always bring up the calculator comparison, but it fundamentally misrepresents what AI actually does.
How so?
Well, a calculator outsources mechanical computation. It does the rote arithmetic so your brain can focus on the higher level logic of the math problem.
Sure, that makes sense.
But generative AI outsources the synthesis. It outsources the logic, the structural design, the blank page generation. If we connect this to the bigger picture of human development, parents aren't worried about their kids forgetting how to do long division. They are terrified of their kids losing the neurological capacity to think critically.
It makes me think of cognitive mapping.
Oh, like with navigation.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
like using a GPS app on your phone. If you drive a new city using GPS every single day, you get to your destination flawlessly, but the spatial mapping part of your brain completely atrophies.
You lose your internal compass.
Exactly. If your phone dies, you are utterly lost in your own neighborhood. These parents are basically worried that AI is a GPS for human thought.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The scientific term for what happens when we learn is myelination, the process where our brain builds strong neural pathways through repetition and, crucially, through struggle.
Right, the struggle is the important part.
The messy middle of learning, the frustration of staring at a blank piece of paper, the friction of trying to synthesize 3 different ideas into a coherent paragraph, that friction is where the brain actually physically develops.
Bypassing the friction bypasses the development.
Exactly.
Because the AI just hands you the finished, perfectly formatted essay, you get the destination without driving the route.
And if a machine can instantly generate a beautiful piece of art or a flawless structural argument, what is the incentive for a 7-year-old to sit with the deep discomfort of not being immediately good at something?
Man, that's a tough question.
That is the specific loss of creativity and originality that parents are flagging. It's the fear that we are optimizing away the struggle that makes us human.
The friction of learning.
Well-
That makes total sense when you put it that way. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Amidst all these very human, very psychological concerns about cognitive development, there is a data point further down the chart that I absolutely did not see coming.
The environmental one.
Yes. Roughly 11% of parents explicitly cited environmental impact as their primary concern.
It is a remarkable data point for a demographic survey at a children's center.
I find it incredibly impressive The parents at this museum are actively worrying about the water usage, the power grids, and the ecosystem strain caused by massive AI data centers.
It's not something you'd expect to be top of mind.
Not at all. We always talk about the cloud as if it's this invisible, magical realm of pure data. But these parents are connecting the digital magic on their phones to the brutal, physical, brick and mortar reality of the server farms running it. To me, it's wild that a parent pushing a stroller is simultaneously doing the mental math on local aquifer depletion.
It really points right back to that global perspective we discussed earlier. The public understanding of this technology has moved past the interface and into the supply chain.
They're seeing the whole picture.
They are. They understand that every time an AI generates an image or synthesizes a document, it requires processing power that physically heats up a server, which requires millions of gallons of water to cool down.
Wow.
They are acknowledging that this digital convenience has a heavy biological tax, and their children are the ones who will have to pay that tax on a warming planet.
So we have painted a fairly intense landscape here.
Very intense.
We have parents carrying the macro burden of societal shifts, deep fears about cognitive atrophy, and anxieties about the physical strain on the planet's resources. And yet there is still that minority we mentioned at the start, roughly a third of the room feeling hopeful or outright positive.
Yes, the duality of it all.
How does that duality exist? How can you look at the atrophy of human thought and the draining of the water table and still feel optimistic about handing this to your kid?
Because the parents view AI as a duality itself. It is a poison and a cure, depending entirely on the dosage and the application.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, the survey responses show that parents recognize the unprecedented utility of the technology. They see AI as a phenomenal tool for logistical organization.
Sure, managing schedules and stuff.
Right. And they see it unlocking radical new scientific and medical discoveries that could save their children's lives.
Which is huge.
And on a micro level, they see it acting as a personalized, infinitely patient tutor for complex subjects like math and science.
There is a specific quote from the written survey that perfectly captures this tightrope walk. One parent wrote that their goal is, quote, using AI to our advantage, not letting AI take advantage of us.
Master the machine before it masters you.
Right. It's no longer about whether you use the tool, it's about who is driving. Like, for a long time, the dominant analogy was that AI is like a wildly capable, incredibly fast intern.
I've heard that one a lot.
Yeah, but I don't think that works anymore because an intern is separate from you. I think these parents view AI more like a powered exoskeleton.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it.
Right. If you put your kid in a robotic exoskeleton, they can suddenly lift a car and run 50 miles an hour. That's amazing utility.
Absolutely.
But if they wear the exoskeleton 24 hours a day, their actual biological muscles will waste away to nothing.
Because they aren't using them.
Exactly. The parents want the kids to have the super strength, but they are desperately trying to figure out how to force their kids to do cognitive resistance training so their own muscles don't disappear.
This raises an important question, though. What does cognitive resistance training actually look like in practice?
Yeah, how do you even do that?
How do children maintain their own strength in an automated world? If you look at the survey data regarding the skills parents hope their children will learn to combat the risks of AI, it isn't what you would expect.
Really, what are they asking for?
Well, they aren't asking for more coding boot camps. They aren't prioritizing prompt engineering or advanced algorithmic computer science.
Wait, really? Their solution to an incoming technological revolution isn't to double down on tech skills.
Not at all. The skills the parents emphasized were stubbornly, fiercely human.
Like what?
They want their children to learn honesty, accountability, empathy, and kindness. They're prioritizing deep cooperation and analog critical thinking over digital fluency.
Okay, my initial reaction to that is that it sounds a bit naive.
It does sound like that at first.
Like it sounds like they are fighting a laser battle with a wooden shield. Why kindness and honesty in the face of a supercomputer?
Look back at the chart of concerns. Right underneath cognitive impacts and creativity, you'll see a massive spike for misinformation, sitting at about 13.5%.
Oh, right, the misinformation spike.
We are rapidly entering a world where fake audio, hyper-realistic generated video, and synthetic text are completely indistinguishable from baseline reality.
Ah, navigating the truth in a synthetic world.
Exactly. The parents realize that you cannot outcompute the machine. You will never be faster than the algorithm.
So you have to play a different game entirely.
Precisely. The ultimate survival skill in a digitally synthetic landscape isn't knowing how to build an AI. It's having the character, the integrity, and the critical thinking to question information, to recognize authentic truth, and to hold other human beings accountable.
That makes a lot of sense.
The parents explicitly noted a deep worry about academic plagiarism and the growing impossibility of distinguishing real from fake content. In a world of infinite synthetic noise, authenticity and integrity become the most valuable currencies.
So it's less about teaching the kid how the algorithm works and more about teaching the kid how to be a person of unshakable integrity when the algorithm constantly offers them a shortcut. You survive a synthetic reality by being hyperhuman.
That is the resistance training. You lean into the traits the machine cannot replicate.
Okay, so if the goal here is raising these deeply grounded, highly empathetic, critical thinkers who can manage this exoskeleton with integrity,
Right.
whose actual job is it to teach them? Because if I am a parent, I am already exhausted just listening to this.
It's a lot to take on.
Between managing the toddler tantrums, paying the mortgage, and worrying about the global power grid, I don't know how I'm supposed to also design a curriculum for out-humaning a supercomputer.
Which is why we have to move from the home to the community here.
Okay.
The transition from the individual household to the community institution is the most urgent part of this data, because time is moving incredibly fast.
How fast are we talking?
Well, the survey notes that this specific generation of kids, the ones who are 1 to 10 years old during this 2026 survey, they will be hitting middle school and high school in a world where AI is not an optional add-on or a novelty app.
It'll just be everywhere.
It will be the foundational infrastructure of their curriculum, their social hierarchy, and the economy they are about to enter.
So what does this all mean for the roadmap ahead? If you are a parent listening to this, you are probably feeling a bit overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the assignment.
Absolutely.
But according to the sources, you aren't alone, and you aren't expected to do it in isolation. Families are actively looking to institutions for a lifeline. They are looking to places exactly like the Children's Museum of Brownsville.
Yes, the community pillars.
The message from the parents is clear. Please, don't just hand my kid an iPad in the corner to show how modern you are. I have screens at home. I need actual guidance.
It completely redefines the role of educational and cultural institutions moving forward.
In what way?
The report underscores that museums, libraries, and schools have a vital role, but it might be the exact opposite of what tech companies are pushing them to do.
Okay, so less tech.
Well, yes, they need to teach how AI works in safe, age-appropriate ways. But more importantly, institutions need to preserve physical, tangible spaces where human interaction, unoptimized curiosity, and analog imagination are the central focus.
They need to become sanctuaries of inefficiency.
Oh, I like that.
Spaces where the friction of learning is not just allowed, but celebrated and protected.
I couldn't agree more with that phrasing. Sanctuaries of inefficiency. If AI is optimizing everything in the outside world for maximum speed, seamless efficiency, and frictionless delivery, the museum needs to be the one place where a child can safely be slow, messy, and wonderfully inefficient.
Yeah, where they can just be kids.
A place where they can spend 20 minutes trying to balance a tower of wooden blocks, watch it collapse, and physically feel the frustration and the ultimate joy of solving the physics problem with their own hands.
That tactile experience.
The technology question that these parents are wrestling with in 2026 is, at its absolute core, a human question. How do we ensure that technology acts as a scaffold for human development rather than a replacement for it?
It is such a heavy, complex burden for this specific cohort of parents. But honestly, parsing through all this data, there is something profoundly beautiful about the clarity they seem to have found in the chaos.
There really is.
We started this deep dive looking at a room full of stressed out, exhausted parents just trying to survive spring break. But when you look at the psychological and societal depth of the data we've just gone through, the parents of 2026 are holding an incredibly powerful, sophisticated duality.
Very mature outlook.
Yeah. They have these high hopes for AI as an educational tool, a personalized tutor, an engine for unimaginable innovation. But that hope is heavily, intentionally balanced by a fierce, protective desire to guard their children's independent thought, their analog creativity, and their fundamental humanity. They truly understand the assignment.
They are impressively clear-eyed about the landscape.
Right.
They aren't ignoring the risks, from the cognitive atrophy to the environmental strain, and they aren't burying their heads in the sand. Instead, they are actively demanding and trying to build a future where technology is forced to serve humanity, rather than conditioning humanity to serve the technology.
It leaves you with so much to process and think about regarding our own relationship with these tools.
It definitely does.
And for you, listening right now, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you navigate your own week. As AI becomes more and more embedded in the background radiation of our daily lives, and as it gets infinitely better at giving us the perfectly synthesized, flawless, right answers in a fraction of a second,
Which it will.
maybe the true mark of human intelligence for this next generation won't be knowing the right answers at all. Maybe, in a world where perfectly generated answers are cheap and instant, the true mark of intelligence will simply be having the human imagination to ask the right questions. The weird, messy, unpredictable questions an AI would never even think to ask.
That is the perfect distinction to end our analysis on.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.